Ooh, all right, thank you so much, Vlad. Firstly, can you all see my screen? You see what I'm sharing?
Yes, everyone
Yes.
sees the screen.
All right, perfect. Well, first things first, thank you for having me so much to present this evening. Like Vlad said, I'm not in Sofia. I wish I was. I've never been before, but I've heard good things. So instead, I'm presenting live from my living room here in London, but it is always a pleasure to present to members of the cryptocurrency community, or at least the cryptocurrency enthusiasts. And the reason for that, the reason I like to speak and present to cryptocurrency people is because I think you understand the pain that I go through sometimes as someone who works in this space when I speak to people outside this industry. So perhaps you guys have been in this situation before where you tell someone that you're interested in crypto, or you work in the cryptocurrency space, or you're passionate about crypto, and they reply with, oh yeah, crypto, I heard a bit about it. It sounds pretty cool, but I mean, the main reason people use it is for crime, right? I mean, isn't that the main reason people use Bitcoin? To buy drugs, to fund terrorism, to commit money laundering. And this view, this sentiment that cryptocurrency is predominantly used by criminals, that's not one that's just held by the average layperson. Politicians, CEOs, major media figures, people across the world seem to think that cryptocurrency is predominantly being used by crime. So how accurate is that viewpoint? How much crime really is there in the cryptocurrency space? What are the major types of crimes we're seeing in cryptocurrency? What are the types of crimes that you in the cryptocurrency space need to be aware of? And what are the trends? What are the changes we're noticing in crime over time? Well, it's a very broad subject, and I don't have a huge amount of time, so I'm going to do my best to cover as much as I can. So I'm going to start off by giving you a brief introduction to Chainalysis and what we do. From there, I'll give you an overview of crypto crime at a very high level, the big figures. From there, I'll look at a few different types of crimes, ranging from sanctions to hacking to scams to darknets to money laundering. So you should get a good high-level overview of the major sources of criminal activity in the cryptocurrency community right now. But before I do any of that, I should probably introduce myself quickly. My name is Diederik Van Wersch, and I'm the Director of Mid-Market Sales at Chainalysis. I've been with the company for about 5 years right now, and 5 years is kind of a lifetime in cryptocurrency terms, so I've seen a lot of ups and downs. And I work with a team that sell compliance and investigatory solutions to cryptocurrency businesses across the world, from London to Dubai to Singapore to Sydney. Now, when I tell you that, you might be thinking a little bit, okay, fine. So you work for a company that sells compliance and investigatory solutions. Why would you know anything about crime? And the reason for that is because Chainalysis is, at its most fundamental level, a data company. What we do, the bread and butter of what Chainalysis actually offers the world, is we're able to map cryptocurrency addresses and transactions to real world services. I imagine most of you there know how the blockchain works. And you know that if you go on a block explorer, you see an indecipherable chain of letters and numbers. What we're able to do is take those letters and numbers and attribute them to real world entities and services. So we can say this address belongs to Coinbase. This transaction belongs to Kraken. But also, we can tell you which addresses belong to more nefarious services, which addresses belong to darknet marketplaces, which addresses belong to sanctioned entities, which addresses belong to terrorism financing. And we offer these services from clients ranging from regulators to law enforcement, to banks, to intelligence agencies, and of course, to a lot of companies in the cryptocurrency space. So nobody really knows more about what's going on the blockchain than us. Both the good and the bad. And the bad is what we're here to talk about today. Now, I mentioned at the beginning about the types of how much crypto crime we're seeing and the sentiment that cryptocurrency is predominantly used by criminals. So how much crime is there in crypto as a percentage of the overall ecosystem? I mean, the skeptics would have you believe it's a lot. Are we talking 30%, 20, 15, 10? Well, according to our own data that's published by our research team, based on all the transactions we've viewed on all the blockchains we've covered, the amount of cryptocurrency activity related to crime in 2022 was just 0.24%. So allow me to reiterate that. Just 0.24% of all transactions in the cryptocurrency space last year were related to illicit activity. Now, so this really throws a spanner in the works to this whole view that cryptocurrency is predominantly just used by criminals. In the traditional fiat space, by the way, the UNODC estimates that 3 to 5% of global GDP is related to criminal activity. So not only is 3 to 5% higher than 0.24%, it's also an estimate. I don't really know how they come to that estimate, and I think it's almost impossible to measure. The beauty of the blockchain is because everything is public, because there is a public ledger that's visible for the world to see, and we're able to attribute these transactions to real world entities, we can get extremely granular. Far from being a tool to aid and abet criminals, I would argue there is nowhere where criminals are less safe than on the blockchain. It's actually a very poor tool for money laundering. And we can see that overall in the past few years, the amount of criminal activity has been pretty low. 2019 saw it at a high for the past few years at 1.9%. The reason for this was there was a very big hack of a service called, a very big scam rather, of a service called Plus Token. But since then, it's been declining. And yes, it has increased year on year. So last year was 0.12%. But I'm going to get into a little bit why that is, why we're seeing a slight increase in crime year on year, even though as an overall percentage, it's pretty low. Now, to be clear, it's not, I don't want to paint too pretty a picture. Yes, it's only 0.24%, but in terms of absolute numbers, we're still talking about $20.6 billion of criminal activity. And that's actually an all-time high. So of course, the ecosystem has grown. So as a percentage, the amount of criminality has decreased. But in absolute terms, we saw more cryptocurrency crime last year than any previous year. And one of the major drivers here was the increase in sanctions. So sanctions represented right here on this light blue. You can see there's basically no sanctions. It's a negligible amount of criminal activity related to sanctions in 2021 and every preceding year. Whereas here, it's a very big chunk. And we're going to get into that in a second. But the good news is, overall, across the board, if you look at the majority of categories of crime is down year on year. So for darknet marketplaces, scams, terrorism financing, fraud shops, crime is down. For stolen funds, so these are hacks, crime is up 7%, and we're going to get into that in a bit more detail. However, there's one type of crime we're not showing right here because it would throw the graph off completely, and that's the aforementioned sanctions. Sanctions actually increased, I think, 152,000%, 152,000% increase in sanctioned activity, and that's what I'm going to cover with you first right here to explain why that is. So with sanctions, what we're talking about predominantly is the Office of Foreign Asset Control in the United States sanctioning entities and cryptocurrency addresses. So this is an interesting graph. What it shows you is the amount of addresses and entities that have been sanctioned over time by OFAC. So in 2018, we saw the first cryptocurrency addresses that were sanctioned. I think there were two addresses related to Iran. Year on year, it's gotten more and more, and we saw a drastic rise in the number of sanctioned addresses and number of sanctioned crypto-related entities in 2022. In a weird way, I almost view this as a positive. You see, the fact that OFAC is sanctioning crypto addresses at all shows that the US government takes cryptocurrency seriously. If they thought it was a fad, if they thought crypto would just go away, which was kind of the sentiment for the first, let's say, decade of crypto's lifespan, they wouldn't bother doing all this. They wouldn't bother sitting around sanctioning addresses. The fact that we're seeing more entities get sanctioned is almost a testament to the maturity of the cryptocurrency space. Now, there were three major sanctioned entities that drove the majority of the crime this year that saw the big rise. One of the biggest was Garantex. Now, Garantex is at what's called a high-risk exchange based in Russia. So a high-risk exchange is an exchange like, the ones you're aware of, Coinbase, Binance, where you can buy and sell crypto. But unlike those exchanges, which actually take money laundering seriously, these exchanges basically don't care. They are just a haven for money launderers. So Garantex, 6% of all the funds it received, this is what's represented in blue right here, 6% of all the funds they received, or sorry, that's represented in orange, were related to illicit activity. So darknet, stolen funds, a lot of ransomware was going through. So when people would commit ransomware, they would launder their funds at Garantex. 6% of illicit activity going into an exchange doesn't maybe sound like a lot, but most exchanges would be well below 1%. So it's extremely high for an exchange. Now, it was sanctioned by the US government. It's a pretty big exchange, had a lot of transactions going through it. But they're based in Russia, and they just don't really care that they're sanctioned, and Russian people can still continue to operate with them. So they've not seen a big drop off in the amount of transactions they're doing. And that's one of the reasons sanctions is so high, because we have a relatively large service that got sanctioned. It brings up the number. After that, we have Hydra Marketplace. Hydra Marketplace was one of the biggest darknet marketplaces, I think maybe even the biggest in the entire world, before it was taken down by German authorities, I think April of this year. Now, as you can imagine, the majority of transactions to Hydra Marketplace were illicit. I mean, it's a place where you can buy drugs and other nefarious goods. So obviously a lot of shady actors are going there. We actually, because the entire website was now taken down, there is very little transaction going to Hydra Marketplace addresses at the moment. And the final one, and this is really interesting, was Tornado Cash. So Tornado Cash are what's called a decentralized mixer. So similar to other decentralized services like decentralized exchanges or decentralized lending protocols, it's not that one person sits around running it. It's not a centralized entity that has a team necessarily working on it 24/7. It was developed by a group of developers, and now it's simply a protocol that people can continue to use. It's by its nature decentralized. So it got sanctioned, and the reason it got sanctioned is because they were receiving a lot of funds as a mixer from the North Korean government, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. And this really starts to pose some very interesting philosophical questions about the nature of regulation in the era of Web3. How can you sanction a decentralized protocol? What does that really mean in principle? I mean, yes, they took down the website, the web UI for Tornado Cash, but people can continue to use it. You can't really take down a decentralized protocol by its very nature. Who is responsible for the activities of a decentralized protocol? The people that first created it, the people that are using it right now? These are all questions regulators are having to grapple with. And it's really interesting to see that this is the first instance of a decentralized service being sanctioned. So these three were driving the massive increase in sanctioned activities. And it's just the fact that OFAC is taking crypto far more seriously and sanctioning a lot more entities. The next type of crime I want to look at, and it's a little bit linked to this, is hacking. So hacks take a number of different forms in the cryptocurrency space, but I want to show this graph to you. So what this shows you right here is that hacks, they had a slight increase in 2018 of about 1.5 billion, but 0.5 billion in 2019, same in 2020, and then we saw a drastic increase in 2021. Okay, and then even an increase on that in 2022. So what happened between 2020 and 2021 that led to this massive rise in cryptocurrency related services being hacked? Well, I'll tell you, it was the rise of DeFi, decentralized finance. So back in the day, in the yesteryears of crypto, way back in 2019, the majority of services that were hacked were centralized exchanges. So these are exchanges that are, owned and operated by a centralized group of people, and they sit on a large amount of crypto that they use for liquidity. Now they hold the private keys, the people that run this exchange, they hold the private keys, effectively the password to this cryptocurrency. What these hackers would do is they'd find a way to obtain the private key usually through phishing attacks. And they were then able to take the funds and then siphon them off the exchange. So that's how hacks used to take place. But notice this trend right here. This pink section, that refers to DeFi protocols. So you can see it's increased year on year to the point that in 2022, 80% of all hacks have occurred on decentralized protocols. Hackers aren't going to centralized exchanges anymore. It's too hard to hack them. They're hacking decentralized protocols. Why? Well, DeFi is a very new and very exciting piece of technology. But since it's so nascent, a lot of tech entrepreneurs, they haven't really sorted out all the kinks yet. All the code for a DeFi protocol, whether it be a mixer or a decentralized exchange, all the code is public and available for the world to see. But if there is an exploit in that code, if there is some vulnerability that a hacker can take advantage of, they can use that to siphon the funds away from this decentralized protocol. And if you keep up to date with the crypto news, you've probably noticed that every single day or every other day, it seems like some type of decentralized business is getting hacked. And that's what's really driving this increase in hack. It's DeFi services being hacked. Now, there are ways to mitigate this, and there are other third-party services you can do to check your code, but it's a big problem in the cryptocurrency space. And I'll say, if you work for some type of decentralized protocol, we at Chainalysis, we offer an incident response service where you can basically you pay for an insurance premium effectively, and we're able to assist you with an investigation in the event of a hack almost immediately. Now, the reason these hacks are getting a lot of global concern is because the North Korean government is actually the major culprit behind these hacks. Look how much money the North Korean affiliated actors managed to take this year. 1.6 billion. That's a significant increase on the 429 billion from the year previous. And I mean, if you think about it, North Korea, they're not exactly known for having a booming economy. So $1.6 billion coming in from hacking to them, this is a pretty legitimate industry. So this is obviously a major geopolitical concern, and this is the reason that Tornado Cash got sanctioned, because they were being used by these North Korean hackers to launder their funds. So hacks are definitely top of mind by a lot of criminal investigators in the cryptocurrency space. Next up, we have scams. Now, scams take a number of different forms in crypto. You have the most classic investment scam is basically, hey, send me 1 Bitcoin and I'll send you 2 back, or send me your Bitcoin and I promise you 10% returns month on month. And some of these hacks can be absolutely enormous. If you look at things like Plus Token, if you look at things like OneCoin, these are some of the biggest hacks in all of financial history, let alone cryptocurrency history. But I'm sorry, I'm saying hacks, I mean scams. But scams are almost the most common type of cryptocurrency crime. You tend to see them a lot. And they declined. The good news is they declined 46% year on year. It went from 10.9 billion to 5.9 million this year. Obviously, that's of course a good thing, but the reason they declined is because we went from a bull market to a bear market. So in a bull market, you will see a lot more scams because, you got to think a lot of naive people who aren't well educated on this industry, they're hearing stories about all these people who are making so much money in crypto. It becomes quite easy to trick these more naive players into investing in some fake protocol. However, now that we're in a bear market, crypto is less attractive to a lot of outsiders. The people who are in this industry tend to be a bit more well-educated. So you'll usually see when the market is doing better, you will see an increase in the amount of scam activity. But I know because we work extensively at Chainalysis with law enforcement, I can tell you that it's definitely the #1 form of crime they tend to come to us with. We did see that there was one big scam this year. Hyperverse.net brought in $1.3 billion, and there was a few other scams as well. So scams are always a type of crime that everyone operating in the cryptocurrency space should be aware of. There needs to be education in the space. And we at Chainalysis, if you're an exchange or some other type of centralized service, we can offer you our KYT solution, which can screen addresses to let you know before you send funds there if it's going to some type of scam entity. So there are ways to mitigate the effects of these scams. Next up, for the next type of crypto crime, we have darknet marketplaces and fraud shops. Fraud shops being places where you can buy stolen credit cards and stolen passwords. I always think of darknet marketplaces as almost like the most OG type of cryptocurrency crime, like the original cryptocurrency crime. So many of you, I imagine, have heard of the infamous Silk Road darknet marketplace that was run from 2011 to 2013 by Ross Ulbricht. Now, the reason this is it's the story of Silk Road is very much entwined with the story of cryptocurrency generally, is because it was a darknet marketplace which allowed people to buy drugs in Bitcoin. And this was way back in the early 2010s. Now, for a lot of law enforcement, a lot of the mainstream media, a lot of the mainstream public, the first time they ever heard of Bitcoin, the first time Bitcoin was ever really used for payments at a large scale was on this darknet marketplace. So it clearly was used for a negative purpose. And that embedded in a lot of people's minds this idea that cryptocurrency is just used to buy drugs. And I feel like crypto has been trying to shake this reputation ever since the day of the Silk Road. Now, darknet marketplaces, again, their revenues dropped significantly in 2022. The reason for this, you can see it went from 3.1 billion to 1.5 billion. The reason for this was because of Hydra Marketplace. So you can see right here on the graph, Hydra Marketplace is the massive darknet marketplace that got taken down earlier. Here on this graph, you can see month by month how cryptocurrency transactions have been increasing and decreasing to darknet marketplaces. Look right here in April of 2022, when Hydra was taken down, and boom, it drops off precipitously. It is a massive drop. However, it doesn't go away altogether. And you can see it's starting to creep back up there. Why is that? Well, if you actually speak to investigators on darknet marketplaces, what they describe it is working on darknet markets is like playing whack-a-mole, You take one down and 3 more come in its place. So yes, they took down Hydra Marketplace, biggest darknet marketplace in the world. Fantastic. Give themselves all a pat on the back. However, now all the buyers and sellers that were on Hydra Marketplace, well, they're just going to go to different exchanges. So what you see right here, this is Hydra Marketplace month on month. You can see, of course, it collapses right here as they get taken down. However, look at all these other darknet marketplaces that are starting to pick up. Look at this one, the light pink one right here, called Mega Darknet Market. Look how it's been increasing. Look at this one, this orange one right here, Black Script Market. This one's also been increasing. This is basically all the users of Hydra jumping on to one of these other exchanges. So it's like the myth of Sisyphus. You're rolling that rock up the hill, they take down the exchange, only for it to come rolling back down the hill all the way again, and you having to pick it up and having to take down the next darknet marketplace. It keeps going on in perpetuity. I don't know what the solution here is, but it seems like it's almost impossible to completely get rid of darknet marketplaces. Finally, the final type of cryptocurrency crime I want to cover with you is money laundering. So what does money laundering mean in cryptocurrency terms? Well, think about all the different types of crimes we've spoken about: scams, darknet marketplaces, sanctioned entities. If I'm the criminal actor and I've, let's say, received some crypto from a scam, well, I'm sitting on some Bitcoin, some ETH, some Link, whatever it is. I want to go convert that into dollars or euros or rubles so I can go buy myself nice things. So what do I do with my Bitcoin or my crypto after I receive it from an illicit purpose? Well, that depends, but what you can see, what this is looking at is the destination of funds leaving illicit wallets. So where are criminals sending their funds to? In orange, you can see that they send it predominantly to centralized services. So these are cryptocurrency exchanges, not even illegal cryptocurrency exchanges. A lot of legitimate exchanges, perhaps, that aren't necessarily doing their diligence, or maybe they are doing their diligence. So these criminals are sending their funds to these illicit services, to these legitimate services rather. But because that exchange uses Chainalysis or some other type of provider, they're able to see that these funds are coming from an illicit source and report them to the regulator. One thing you'll notice is that in yellow, the amount of transactions that are being sent to DeFi has increased year on year. 2022 had the highest number of transactions being sent to DeFi protocols. So some criminals are getting pretty smart and they're thinking, I'm not going to send my dirty funds to a centralized exchange right here. I'm going to send it to a DeFi protocol. And specifically, if we go back to earlier in the presentation when I was talking about hacks, hackers, so stolen funds, are extremely likely, as in the majority of them, are sending their funds to other DeFi protocols. So what you might see is, let's say North Korea, they might hack some big exchange or some big DeFi protocol, and then they'll take those funds and they'll send it to another decentralized protocol. Why do they send it to other decentralized protocols? Well, they assume that it's more difficult to trace through decentralized exchanges. They also assume that those decentralized services don't have KYC and AML services in place. They're wrong. Chainalysis can still offer AML services to them, but that's their own mindset. And they're trying to take advantage of the fact that DeFi is still in its infancy. The beauty of the blockchain, though, is every transaction is public, and hacks and other types of crimes are really very difficult to get away with. I mean, there is a public ledger indicating everything you do. The way we've seen cases with some hacks where hackers have had just to give the money back because every single time they send funds to another address, all of Twitter, all of social media blows up because everyone's following their activity. The example I give is like, imagine if I just robbed the bank, but everywhere I go, people can look up on Google Maps where I am. I'm probably not going to get very far. And that's effectively what we're able to do with blockchain technology. And we're able to do a lot more at Chainalysis. So we have a number of different types of service we can offer for government, for law enforcement, for cryptocurrency exchanges, for investigators, both in the compliance and investigatory space. So criminals don't have, it's actually still now getting very difficult for criminals to get away with the proceeds of their crime. That's basically everything I wanted to cover with you today. If you found this interesting, I'm really just scratching the surface of all the different types of crypto crime I could be talking about. I didn't even mention things like Oracle manipulation. I didn't mention terrorism financing. And if you want to read it in more depth, I really encourage you to go download our 2023 cryptocurrency crime report. It's the most in-depth material available on cryptocurrency crime, maybe in the world. It's probably the leading publication on it. And I think that's really where I want to end things, but I just want to leave on one parting note. I noticed this presentation has been a lot about the bad, the crime, the shady actors, and it's important that we keep that in mind, but it's also important that we remember that 0.24% figure. All the scams I've shown you, all the hacks, all the stolen funds, everything I've presented falls into that 0.24% category. So it means that crime, while it does exist in the cryptocurrency space, is really a relatively small problem in proportion, and it's a few bad actors that are really tarnishing the reputation of this entire industry. At Chainalysis, we really do believe in the power of cryptocurrency. We believe it's going to fundamentally change the way that we think about money and finance, but we want to ensure that people who interact on the blockchain are able to do so in a safe and secure manner. And we want to work with individuals like you in the room right there to help make that a reality. So I thank you very much for your time. I hope this was informative, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much, guys. A round of applause for this. That was actually super interesting, and I love the highlights, and I love the historical references, and really the whole evolution of the presentation was really great. So it's time for some questions, guys. So do you have anything to ask in terms of the report? Actually, I've shared this report in Sofia Meetup when it came out, I believe 2 months ago, 2 months, something like that ago.
Something like that, yeah, it's pretty recent.
Yeah. So guys, any questions? Actually, then maybe I can start with the first one. So in terms of DeFi, because I'm actually in the DeFi space, you mentioned that you offer services for DeFi protocols.
Yeah.
Can you share a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So we have a couple of different services that we can offer depending on the needs. On the compliance side, what we offer is an address screening solution. So obviously with DeFi, you can't block transactions outgoing. You don't actually control the transactions in the same way you would on an exchange. However, what we can do is if you have a DeFi protocol, we can set it up so that if an address wishes to interact with your DeFi protocol, let's say they have a MetaMask and they want to connect with you, at the moment that they hit connect, we can screen the address of the service of the address of the wallet that wants to connect with you. And if that wallet is linked with risky or nefarious activity, you can set it up so that wallet won't be allowed to interact with you, at least via the web UI. Of course, if they just still want to send funds to one of your addresses, there isn't much you can do about it, but at least gives you that first guard of protection. So that's one thing we can offer. The second thing we can offer is Storyline. It's an investigatory tool specifically built for Web3 and DeFi. So if you have been hacked, or if you want to conduct an investigation to see where funds have gone in the DeFi space, this is a tool specifically built for that. It's specifically tailor-made for DeFi and for investigations. And finally, I mentioned the fact that hacks are very prevalent in the cryptocurrency space. We offer incident response that is predominantly being sold to DeFi protocols where they pay for a certain amount of coverage for the entire year. Then if they get hacked, they call us. We have a team of investigators. I'm talking ex-police officers, FBI, CIA investigators. They call us, and then immediately we're able to get on this hack and try and recover the funds. So that's in a nutshell the different types of services we're able to offer DeFi.
Great, that sounds very interesting. And regarding individuals then, because we have a lot of physical persons that constantly get scammed, hacked, and so on. At least I have a lot of people contacting me with issues. We also have currently this one case where there are 100 wallets that are being drained from individuals who have followed perfectly legitimate practices, and they are like crypto OGs. So there's like an investigation going. But yeah, generally focusing on individuals. If I get hacked, can I get can I use Chainalysis services to help me somewhere?
Yeah, that's a valid question. It's one we get a lot of requests like that. So at the moment, we wouldn't do it for an individual. We would do a hack for a company. However, another customer segment we have is we sell into a lot of investigatory partners. So we have a lot of law firms, we have a lot of investigatory services. We sell them our software and we train them on how to use it. and they offer these services to individuals. So what would happen is if you came to us as an individual with an issue, we would just point you to one of our partners who has been trained on how to use our software, and they would be able to assist you with the investigation.
Okay, interesting. I'm pretty curious if Bulgarian authorities have access to Chainalysis services. Probably, yeah, I'm not sure. All right, so anyone has something specific to ask? Everyone's shy. Okay.
Don't be shy.
I had actually another question, but while you were speaking, I forgot it. Well, I'll give you like 20 more seconds, guys, if you have something to ask. Now is your time. Of course, there's a lot of information inside the report. I believe it's like quite long. It's like 60 or 80 pages, very detailed, very interesting. I'm myself using screenshots from that report when I'm doing DeFi presentations, just to show that, I mean, yeah, DeFi is very interesting, which you also showed. Yeah, so, okay, one final thing in relation to one of our sponsors, because we had a investigation, well, we had an announcement of an investigation related to Nexo, which mentioned that a certain address was connected to some terrorist organization, something like that. So do you guys help with this type of like services? And if, for example, I'm a company as big as Nexo, is there anything better that I can use than Chainalysis to identify these type of actors? So, for example, if I use Chainalysis to identify a transfer, and that transfer after that is identified as some kind of illicit transaction, and Chainalysis, for example, did not manage to identify that because, let's say, you guys just were one day late to update your list. Like, who is liable for this? Can authorities go after the company, having in mind that the company has done everything they can in order to guard itself against this type of transactions?
So basically, Vlad, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question. If, let's say, Nexo or another big service were to interact with an address that they thought was clean at the time, but then one day later, we at Chainalysis, we come to them and say, hey guys, by the way, it turns out this address is actually risky. Is Nexo liable for that? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, that's a valid question. The first point I'll make on our data set, because you asked, is something better? I mean, well, I am in charge of sales, so I'm obviously going to say no, but I will say that we can back up the fact that we do have the broadest and largest data set in the market. So we've been around the longest, we have the biggest team working on our data, and importantly, we work with more customers than anybody else in the space. So we work with all the biggest exchanges, but we also work extensively with basically every major law enforcement agency you can think of in Europe, US, globally. And what happens is these law enforcement agencies, when they take down a darknet marketplace, like let's say when they take down Hydra, they share all the data with us. So they share all those addresses with us, which means we have a very comprehensive data set, bigger than anything else you're going to find in this industry. So I'll say that. Now, for the circumstance you mentioned where they interact with a service and later they find out it's risky, I mean, that depends a little bit, because there are cases where, for example, an address, let's say a scam. Scams don't announce themselves as scam. It's not always clear that something's a scam. So maybe someone sends funds to something that at the time looks like a legitimate service. Later, we uncover it's a scam, and then we retroactively will alert the exchange that, hey, this address was illicit. If this happens, what happens is that we have a date of the transaction, and we have the date at which we were able to actually inform the exchange that this was an illicit service, if there was a lag there. So what any service could do is just point to the regulator, point to law enforcement, hey, listen, yes, we sent through this transaction, or we approved this transaction. At the time, we thought it was clean. However, later on, it was identified as a risky service. At the end of the day, Chainalysis is recognized as the premier solution. We have very good relationships, and we work with many regulators across the world. So if you indicate to your regulators already, hey, I'm working with Chainalysis, I have all the right tools in place, I'm doing everything I can, then if something slips up because there's an address that wasn't able to be identified in time, they in most cases should be understanding of that, yes. So the exchange would not be held liable for that, no, in the vast majority of cases.
Great. Okay, thank you. Any final questions or comment? Anyone wants to ask something in relation to crypto crime, which 0.24% of all crypto transactions? Just another note on that. All right, so I guess this is it. Diederik, thank you so much for joining. That was actually one of the best presentations that we have had this year for sure. Very extensive, very interesting, and I'll be sharing a recording of this with the rest of the community after about 2 weeks when it's ready. So thank you so much. And if you want to say something finally somewhere that we can go to learn more or to have a look at the services or anything in addition, now is the time.
Yeah, perfect. I just want to thank you all for attending. I do find it great that it's interesting in the cryptocurrency space. It's when I joined crypto, I thought, okay, I'm going to be speaking to a lot of clients in Germany, in Switzerland, in the UK. But a lot of the traditional European powerhouses, they aren't very prominent in crypto. What I see is Eastern Europe, countries like Bulgaria, Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, they're very prominent in the cryptocurrency space. So I just want to say it's looking very exciting for Eastern Europe when it comes to cryptocurrency. And I want you guys to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. I want to thank you very much for your time this evening. I hope you found this enjoyable. If you are either working for a crypto business, you have a crypto business, you want to learn more about our compliance and investigatory solutions, please, you could, I'm Diederik at Chainalysis.com. Perhaps if you get in contact with Vlad, you can share my details. Or if you just want to learn more about what we do in general, just go to our website. We have a blog. We publish new information on a very regular basis. So there's always something new to learn in the world of crypto. But in general, I just want to thank you very much for your time.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Това е, значи, дано е било интересно. На мен беше доста интересно, въпреки че съм чел репорта, беше доста интересно. Така че виждайки хората от Chainalysis, според мен са най-първата компания, която в момента анализира информация върху блокчейна. Най-вероятно не са много ефтини. Да. Те се потвърждават, но ако сте компания, особено голяма компания като Nexo в криптосвета, няма как да ги използвате. Даже сигурно някои компании използват няколко такива услуги. И сега това ми беше въпрос с Мика. Да, нищо сетих се малко мина време. Но с маркетинг Crypto регламента, предполагам, че те като станат още по-интересни и важни за компаниите. Така че това беше Meetup днес. Сега е време за нетворкинг и още приемане. Така че това е следващия път. И това. Мерси много. Чао!